I sold the home I shared with my late wife to give my son and his fiancée a $300,000 down payment for their dream life. The day before their wedding, they thanked me by saying the best gift I could give was to disappear from their family. They thought I was a sentimental old man with nothing left to my name. They had no idea my lawyer had secretly structured that gift as a loan and made me a 35% owner of their house. I granted their wish and disappeared. Right after making one phone call that put their home on the market and a second that canceled their entire $50,000 wedding reception. Your comments and support mean the world to us. Tell us, what challenges have you faced in life, or maybe you're facing right now? Like this video and right where you are watching us from, we will be happy to send you our regards. It was the day before the wedding, and the house was a chaotic symphony of frantic preparation. Florists darted through the grand two-story foyer, their arms laden with white blossoms. Caterers whispered in conspiratorial huddles in the gleaming, oversized kitchen. And in the center of it all, my future daughter-in-law, Brianna, reigned like a queen on the eve of her coronation. She stood, phone pressed to her ear, directing the chaos with the flick of a perfectly manicured finger, a faint, perpetually dissatisfied frown etched onto her beautiful face. I, Leland Hayes, a 68-year-old man who had funded this entire circus, was relegated to the corner of the living room, ostensibly polishing a set of silver champagne flutes, but, in reality, feeling as decorative and useless as the ridiculously expensive ice sculpture of a swan that was scheduled to arrive in the morning. I watched my son, Andre, as he hovered near Brianna, his expression a familiar mixture of adoration and anxiety. He would nod at her sharp commands, his only purpose to echo her desires and soothe her manufactured crises. This was not the son I had raised. The boy I knew, the one who worked summers cutting lawns to buy his first car, the young man who held my hand at his mother's funeral and promised to always take care of me, had been replaced by this stranger, a man who seemed to have misplaced his own spine. The house itself was a testament to this transformation. It was a sprawling, modern mansion in a gated community, the kind of place with more bathrooms than people and a backyard the size of a public park. It was beautiful, sterile, and utterly devoid of the warmth that makes a house a home. It was Brianna's palace, and I was just a ghost haunting the halls, a relic of a past life Andre was eager to shed. My presence here had become a source of quiet friction, a constant, low-grade irritation for Brianna. I tried to make myself useful, to find my place in this new family dynamic they were forging, but every attempt was subtly rebuffed. I'd offer to help with the garden, and she would hire a landscaping crew the next day. I'd cook a Sunday dinner, the pot roast recipe my late wife Thelma had perfected, and Brianna would pick at it before announcing she was craving sushi. They weren't just ignoring me. They were systematically erasing me, papering over my existence with their new, shiny life. I was a loose thread on their perfect tapestry, and I could feel Brianna's fingers itching to snip me off. I just never imagined she would choose to do it the day before she was supposed to officially join our family. The cruelty of the timing was a special kind of poison, and I was about to be served a lethal dose. 3 years ago, this scenario would have been unthinkable. 3 years ago, I was a man with a home. Not just a house, but a home. The kind you build with your own hands and fill with a lifetime of love. It was a cozy brick bungalow in one of Atlanta's historic neighborhoods, the kind with a wide front porch and a sprawling magnolia tree in the yard. My wife Thelma and I had bought it as a wreck and poured our souls into its restoration. I could still feel the phantom sensation of her hand in mine as we painted the walls, the echo of her laughter as we laid the hardwood floors. Every room held a memory. Every scuff on the floor told a story. After she passed, the house was my sanctuary, my connection to the 40 years of love we had shared. It was my anchor in a world that had been cast adrift. Then, Andre met Brianna. She was ambitious and beautiful, and she saw in my son a man of potential. But she didn't want the life he had. She wanted the life she believed he deserved. A life that looked good on social media. She despised our old neighborhood, calling it quaint, but inconvenient. She wanted new construction, a blank slate, a dream home, as she called it. And Andre, completely besotted, wanted to give it to her. The problem was, their ambition far outstripped their bank accounts. That's when they came to me. We sat on that old front porch, the one where Thelma and I had watched 1,000 sunsets, and they laid out their vision. Brianna did most of the talking, her voice a syrupy blend of aspiration and flattery. Andre just nodded along, his eyes shining with the reflected light of her dreams. They needed help with the down payment, a significant amount of help. So, I made the biggest sacrifice of my life. I sold my home, the repository of my memories, the last physical piece of my life with Thelma. The sale brought in just over $300,000 after fees. I signed the entire amount over to them in a single bank transfer. I remember their promises, their voices thick with performative gratitude. "Oh, Dad, we can't believe you do this for us," Brianna had gushed, hugging me tightly. "You'll always have a home with us. We'll build a beautiful in-law suite for you. You're our family. Always." Andre had looked me in the eye, his own gaze earnest and sincere. "This is for all of us, Dad. A new start. We'll take care of you, I promise." I believed them. I chose to believe them. I packed up my life into a few boxes and moved into the guest room of the grand empty house my sacrifice had bought, clinging to the belief that I wasn't losing a home, but gaining a new one. It was a foolish, sentimental miscalculation. I had mistaken a business transaction for a loving promise. I had provided the capital, and now that the investment had matured, my role in the company was being terminated. The flashpoint came, as it so often does, over money. My money. I was in the kitchen, carefully arranging a tray of canapes, when Brianna and Andre walked in, deep in a heated discussion with the wedding planner on speakerphone. The topic was the necessity of 2 life-sized ice swans to flank the entrance of the Miami ballroom. The cost was astronomical, an amount that could have fed a family for a year. "I just don't see the point," I heard Andre say, his voice strained. "It's frozen water, Brie. It's going to melt." "It's not frozen water, Andre," Brianna snapped, her voice sharp and brittle. "It's an aesthetic. It's about creating an atmosphere of elegance. It's what people will remember." Seeing my chance to be a voice of reason, I gently interjected. "She's right. It is about the atmosphere," I said, trying to be diplomatic. "But maybe we could scale back on some of the grander gestures. It would free up some of the budget, take a little pressure off." I had been watching the costs for this wedding spiral into the stratosphere, all of it being charged to the credit card I had given them for wedding expenses. I was paying for every last sequin and champagne bubble, and the swans felt like a particularly galling extravagance. Andre turned to me, his face a cold mask of frustration. "Dad, this is supposed to be our special weekend. Brianna has worked so hard on this. The last thing we need is your negativity dragging everything down." My negativity? The words hit me like a physical slap. I had spent the entire morning running errands for them, a willing, unpaid assistant to their grand production. I had overseen the flower delivery, helped the caterers unload their vans, and single-handedly assembled 100 tiny, ridiculously complex wedding favors. I had been nothing but supportive, my only negativity, a gentle suggestion to perhaps not set fire to a pile of money in the name of a melting bird. It was then that Brianna ended her call and turned her full, icy attention to me. She walked over, her movements fluid and predatory. Behind her, hanging on the back of a door in a pristine white bag, was her wedding dress, a silent, mocking specter of the family I thought I was joining. She stopped in front of me, a tight, artificial smile plastered on her face, the kind I had come to despise. "Leland," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You know, Andre and I were just talking. We think the best wedding gift you could possibly give us is to just disappear from our family." The words hung in the air, exquisitely cruel. I looked past her to my son, expecting, praying for him to leap to my defense, to express the shock and outrage I felt. But Andre didn't say a word. He just stood there, his gaze fixed on the floor, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't just allow her to say it. He agreed with it. It was a silent, devastating act of betrayal that severed the last remaining thread of our bond. My heart didn't break. It didn't shatter. Instead, it felt like something inside me turned to stone. All the love, the grief, the hope, and the foolish sentimentality I had been harboring for my son, and this new life solidified into a cold, heavy lump of reality. I was not family. I was a resource. And now that the resource had been fully tapped, I was being declared obsolete, a liability to be discarded before the start of their new fiscal year. I looked from Brianna's smug, smiling face to my son's cowardly, downcast gaze. I took in the scene around me, the opulent kitchen with its granite countertops we had picked out together, the ridiculously expensive floral arrangements I had just helped set up, the whole theatrical production of a life I had financed. I finally saw it all with perfect, painful clarity. They had convinced themselves that my sacrifice was their birthright. "I see," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. It was a stranger's voice, devoid of the warmth and affection I had always reserved for my son. "And where, exactly, would you like me to disappear to?" Brianna shrugged, a picture of casual indifference as she began to inspect her flawless nails. "I don't know. A hotel? Honestly, Leland, I don't really care as long as you're not here tomorrow." "This is my son's wedding," I stated, the words tasting like ash. "And this is, in part, my home." Andre finally spoke, his voice low and thick with shame, but he still wouldn't look at me. "It's really more Brianna's house now, Dad. She's the one who's made it a home. You just, helped out with the money that one time. That one time. $300,000. The entire sum of my life with his mother, reduced to a single casual transaction. The foundation of their life, dismissed as a minor contribution. That was the final click, the sound of a lock turning, of a door closing forever. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a moment of absolute certainty. The grief for the son I had lost was suddenly and completely eclipsed by a cold, righteous anger. "You're right," I said quietly, the calmness in my voice seeming to unnerve them more than any shouting match would have. "You've made your position very clear. I should go." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my back straight. I went to the guest room, the in-law suite that had never materialized, and packed my single suitcase with the few belongings I had here. On my way out, I passed the small table in the hallway, where a framed photograph of Thelma sat. I paused, picking it up and looking into her warm, smiling eyes. "Don't you worry, my love," I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion I refused to show them. "I'm not done fighting yet." I walked out the front door, closing it softly behind me, and stepped out into the humid Georgia evening, an exile from the kingdom I had built. I sat in my car, parked by the curb, and watched the lights of the house blaze against the twilight sky. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally gotten rid of the old man. They had no idea I was about to burn their entire kingdom to the ground. Betrayed and cast out, Leland sits in the darkness, a man who has lost everything. Or has he? They believe he is a relic of the past, a sentimental old fool. They have no idea he is a co-owner of their future, and he is about to make a phone call that will turn their dream wedding into an absolute nightmare. The story is just beginning, and the consequences will be devastating. You have to stay to see what happens next. I sat in the deepening twilight, the engine of my car silent, the keys cold in my hand. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting a lonely, saffron glow on the manicured lawns of the neighborhood. Through the large picture window of the house, their house, I could see a flurry of activity, laughter, champagne glasses held aloft, the silhouette of Brianna showing off her dress. They were celebrating my exile. The thought didn't bring fresh pain, only a profound, clarifying cold. The grief for the son I thought I had, for the family I had hoped to build, was a wave that had already crashed and receded, leaving behind the hard, unyielding bedrock of betrayal. I was no longer a father mourning a loss. I was a man who had been swindled, and the love I felt had been used as the primary tool in the deception. My hands, which had been trembling, were steady now. I reached for my phone. There was only one person I could call. Denise Washington had been more than my lawyer for the past 20 years. She had been my late wife's closest friend, a sister in all but blood. She was sharp, pragmatic, and possessed a fiercely protective loyalty that I now needed more than ever. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Leland? It's late for you to be calling. Is everything all right?" "No, Denise." "Not really," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. I recounted the events of the past hour with the detached precision of a witness giving a police statement. I told her about the ice swans, Andre's accusation of negativity, and Brianna's final, venomous ultimatum. I described my son's silent, nodding assent. I left nothing out. She listened without interruption, a skill she had perfected over decades in her profession. The silence on her end of the line was not empty. It was heavy with a gathering storm. When I finished, she let out a long, slow breath. "Leland," she said, and the warmth was gone from her voice, replaced by the cold, hard anger of a warrior. "I told you, from the day he brought her home. I told you that girl was a viper with a sweet smile. I just never imagined your own son would be the one to hold the basket for her." Her words were a profound validation, a confirmation that I was not the sentimental old fool they believed me to be. "I thought my love for him would be enough," I said, the words tasting like failure. "I thought he'd remember what his mother and I taught him." "Love is not a shield against greed, Leland," she replied, her voice firm. "And you didn't do anything wrong. You acted like a father. They are the ones who have forgotten how to act like human beings." There was a pause, and I heard the faint clicking of a keyboard on her end. "Now," she said, her tone shifting, becoming sharp and focused, "you listen to me very carefully. You are not as powerless as they think you are. Do you remember that Saturday we spent in my office 3 years ago when you were signing the papers for the house money? You thought I was being a cynical old woman, dotting every I and crossing every T." "I remember," I said. "You were very thorough." "I was more than thorough, Leland," she said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. "I was preparing for this exact day." "What do you mean you were preparing?" I asked, a sliver of confusion cutting through my anger. "I signed the money over to them. It was a gift." "No, Leland, it wasn't." Denise's voice was firm, insistent. "You thought of it as a gift. You spoke of it as a gift. But legally, it was anything but. Do you remember I made you sign a separate document? A simple one-page note that you barely glanced at? The memory was hazy, buried under the emotional weight of selling my home. I remembered sitting in her stiff office chair, my heart heavy, signing wherever she told me to sign, trusting her completely. "I remember signing a lot of things," I said. "You signed a promissory note, Leland," she explained, her words landing with the force of a physical impact. "I never filed a gift tax form. I structured that entire $300,000 transfer as a personal loan. It is a legally binding document. The terms state that the loan is due, in full, upon your request or upon the sale of the property it was used to secure. You didn't give them a gift, Leland. You gave them a loan, and the bill is about to come due." I had to pull the phone away from my ear for a second, my mind reeling. A loan. All this time, I had seen myself as the generous patriarch bestowing a life-altering gift. In the cold, clear eyes of the law, I was a creditor. The power dynamic of the entire situation shifted so violently, it made me dizzy. The money they had built their kingdom upon was not theirs at all. It was a debt I now had the absolute right to collect. "My God, Denise," I whispered, my voice hoarse. I had completely forgotten. "I hadn't," she said grimly. "And that's not all. The second thing I did was advise you on the deed to that house. They wanted your name nowhere near it, remember? They said it would be cleaner that way." "Yes," I said, the memory of that particular sting still fresh. "The deed is in Andre's name." "His name is on it." "Yes," she corrected me. "But it is not the only name on it. I insisted, as a condition of the loan, that you be added to the title as a tenant in common. I buried it in the closing documents. They were so excited about their new palace, they probably never even read it." "Leland," she paused, letting the words land with their full, devastating weight. "You are a legal 35% owner of that house." The phone almost slipped from my grasp. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. 35%. I looked up at the magnificent, brightly lit house from which I had just been exiled. It wasn't just their house. It was my house. I wasn't a guest who had overstayed his welcome. I was a landlord, a co-owner, a major stakeholder in the very foundation of their arrogant world. The feeling that washed over me was not joy, not even triumph. It was a sense of profound, terrible power. They had pushed me out, believing I was a feather they could simply blow away. They had no idea I was a wrecking ball. "Denise," I said, my voice steady now, infused with a cold purpose I hadn't felt in years. "What are my options regarding the house?" "You can force a sale," she said simply. "It's called a partition action. As a co-owner, you have the right to cash out your equity. A judge would order the property to be sold, and the proceeds divided according to ownership percentage." I looked at the window again. Brianna was now dancing in the living room, Andre spinning her around. They were dancing on my property, in a home built with my money, celebrating the dismissal of the man who held their entire future in the palm of his hand. "Prepare the notice, Denise," I said, my voice as cold and hard as iron. "I want to sell my share." My next move required a different kind of ammunition. Before leaving their house for the last time, I had grabbed the large, meticulously organized binder labeled Miami Wedding. Brianna was an expert at planning, but careless about execution. She had delegated the tedious task of signing contracts and making payments to me, the family bank. I flipped through the plastic-sleeved pages under the dome light of my car. Florists, photographers, musicians, and the crown jewel, a multi-page, incredibly detailed contract with the most exclusive beachfront hotel in South Beach. I found the page for the main event, the Saturday evening grand ballroom banquet. The total cost, listed in stark black print, was $50,000. And at the bottom of the page, my signature, Leland Hayes, responsible party. My finger traced the lines of the cancellation clause. Cancellation within 24 hours of the event will result in the forfeiture of the 50% deposit and a 25% penalty fee. A steep price, to be sure, but it was a price I was more than willing to pay. This was no longer about money. This was about the currency of respect, and my account had been severely overdrawn. I dialed the number for the hotel's event planning department. A cheerful, efficient-sounding young woman answered. "South Beach Grand. This is Chloe in events. How may I help you?" "Good evening, Chloe," I said, my voice calm and polite. "My name is Leland Hayes. I'm calling in regard to the Hayes-Montgomery wedding scheduled for tomorrow evening." "Oh yes, Mr. Hayes. We are so excited for you all. The final floral arrangements have just arrived, and the ballroom looks absolutely breathtaking. Chef Antoine is already prepping the first course." "That's lovely to hear, Chloe. I said. Unfortunately, there has been a change of plans. I need to cancel the banquet. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could almost hear her smile collapsing. I'm sorry, sir, she stammered. Cancel? The entire banquet? But the wedding is tomorrow. We have 200 guests on the list. I understand the timing is not ideal, I said, a masterpiece of understatement. However, if you check the contract, you will find that I am the signatory and the sole payer on the account. I am exercising my right to cancel. I am fully aware of the penalty fees, and I authorize you to charge them to the credit card on file. But, sir, the bride and groom, the bride and groom are no longer my financial concern, I said, the words feeling liberating. My business is with the hotel. Please confirm that the banquet for tomorrow evening has been canceled. I could hear her frantically typing, the clicks of the keyboard a frantic Morse code of disbelief. Okay, sir. I am processing the cancellation now as per your request, she said, her voice now a stunned, professional monotone. The Hayes Montgomery wedding banquet for Saturday evening is officially canceled. Thank you, Chloe, I said, and ended the call. I looked up at the house one last time. Andre had just popped a bottle of champagne, the cork sailing out onto the lawn. He was toasting his future, a future that, unbeknownst to him, had just been spectacularly, ruinously downsized. They wanted me to disappear. I was simply starting with the part of their life I'd paid for. I drove away from that house and did not look back. I checked into a quiet, comfortable hotel in Buckhead, a world away from the manicured suburbs of Alpharetta. I ordered a simple club sandwich from room service and sat by the window, watching the distant, glittering skyline of Atlanta. I did not feel grief. I did not feel rage. I felt a profound, almost unnerving sense of peace. For the first time in 3 years, I was no longer responsible for anyone's happiness but my own. The burden of their endless wants, their insatiable ambitions, had been lifted. I was free. My phone remained silent for several hours. I knew the hotel in Miami would need time to process the cancellation and would likely try to contact Brianna and Andre first as a courtesy. I imagined their confusion, their frantic calls to Chloe, the dawning horror as they were told the news. The quiet in my room was the calm at the eye of a hurricane I had created. The storm hit at precisely 1:17 a.m. My phone buzzed violently on the nightstand, the screen illuminated with Brianna's name. I let it ring twice before answering, taking a slow sip of water. Hello? I said calmly. Leland, what have you done? Her voice was a hysterical shriek, a nails-on-a-chalkboard sound of pure, undiluted fury. The hotel just called us. They said the banquet is canceled, our wedding banquet. I believe that is what I requested, yes, I replied, my voice maddeningly placid. You requested it? Are you insane? She screamed. Tomorrow, we have 200 people, family from all over the country, coming to our wedding dinner. You can't just cancel it. Brianna, I said, and for the first time, I used a tone with her that was not accommodating or gentle, but sharp and dismissive. You told me, less than 6 hours ago, that the best gift I could give you was to disappear from your family. I am simply fulfilling your request. I am disappearing, and I'm taking my $50,000 banquet with me. It sounds to me like this is your problem now. Dad? It was Andre, his voice cutting in, thick with a mixture of panic and his usual entitlement. Dad, this isn't funny. You have to call them back. You have to fix this. Aunt Carol and Uncle James flew in from North Carolina for this. What are we supposed to tell them? I don't know, son, I said, the word son feeling foreign on my tongue. Perhaps you can tell them the truth, that you valued a weekend of elegance over a lifetime of family, that you traded your father for a pair of ice swans. There was a stunned silence on the other end. You can still get married, of course, I continued, unable to resist a final parting shot. But you'll have to handle the catering yourselves. I hear the Waffle House is open 24/7. Perhaps they can put a rush on an order for 200. I hung up the phone on their sputtering, incoherent rage. I placed it back on the nightstand, the silence of the room flowing back in. The first wave had hit. They were reeling, trying to comprehend the sudden, violent shift in their reality. And they still had no idea that a much larger, more devastating tsunami was already on its way, about to wash away the very ground beneath their feet. The first blow has been struck, and the perfect wedding is in ruins. Andre and Brianna are in a state of shock, but their nightmare is only just beginning. They think this is about a canceled party, about money. They have no idea that the real battle, for the house, for their future, for every dollar they took for granted, is about to begin. The confrontation that's coming next will be even more shocking. You cannot afford to miss it. The morning of what was supposed to be his wedding day, my son took a 6 a.m. flight from Miami back to Atlanta. He didn't text or call. I knew he was coming. A man like Andre, whose entire life has been cushioned by the efforts of others, doesn't handle consequences well. He doesn't adapt or strategize. He seeks to restore the original status quo by applying pressure to the person he believes is the source of his discomfort. He was coming to me not to apologize or understand, but to force me to turn the money back on, to reset the game to a time when he was still winning. He was a spoiled child coming to demand his confiscated toys back, and he had no idea the entire playroom was about to be put into foreclosure. He showed up at my hotel room door just before 10 o'clock. He looked awful. His expensive linen suit was rumpled from a sleepless flight, and his eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with the red of rage and exhaustion. He had clearly expected to find me wallowing in a state of fatherly guilt. Instead, he found me sitting in an armchair by the window, showered, dressed in crisp slacks and a polo shirt, calmly reading the morning paper and sipping a cup of coffee. The sight of my tranquility seemed to enrage him more than anything else. "How could you?" he seethed, storming into the room and letting the door slam shut behind him. "How could you do this to me? To us? On my wedding day?" I carefully folded my newspaper and placed it on the table beside me. "Good morning, Andre," I said, my voice even. "I see you've left your bride in Miami. Is the wedding off, or did you just come back for a fight?" "The wedding is a disaster," he yelled, pacing the length of the room like a caged panther. "Brianna is a mess. Her mother is hysterical. 200 people are sitting in a hotel with nothing to do tonight because their banquet, our banquet, was canceled by a bitter old man having a temper tantrum." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, letting his words hang in the air. "Bitter?" I mused, looking out the window at the Atlanta skyline. "No, I don't think bitter is the right word. Deliberate, perhaps, resolute. I believe the term is enforcing boundaries." I turned my gaze back to him. The coldness in my eyes seemed to startle him. "This isn't about the wedding, Andre. It was never about the wedding. This is about respect. A concept you and Brianna seem to have forgotten. You don't get to treat the person funding your life like a disposable inconvenience and then get angry when he closes the bank account." "So, this is all about money?" He scoffed, throwing his hands up in the air. "I knew it. My own father is holding my happiness hostage over a few dollars." "A few dollars?" I let out a short, sharp laugh. $50,000 is not a few dollars. $300,000 is not helping out one time. It's a lifetime of my work, of your mother's, and my sacrifices. And it is not the money I am concerned with. It is the fact that you saw that sacrifice not as a gift of love, but as an obligation. You saw me not as your father, but as a functionary, an ATM to be used and then discarded. You didn't just disrespect me, Andre. You erased me, and you stood there and nodded while that woman told me to disappear. Well, I have disappeared. My money has disappeared. You are now experiencing the direct consequences of your own choices. My calmness was a wall he couldn't scale, and I could see the frustration in his eyes turning to desperation. His anger wasn't working. Now, he would pivot to guilt. "I can't believe this," Andre said, his voice changing, the anger draining away to be replaced by a wounded, pleading tone. He sank onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. It was a performance I had seen many times since he was a boy, the one he used when he had broken a rule and was trying to soften the punishment. "You're my father. You're supposed to want me to be happy." "More than anything in the world," I said, and my voice was softer now, tinged with a genuine, deep-seated sorrow. "Which is why this is so difficult. I am watching you tie your happiness to a woman who is teaching you to be cruel, to be ungrateful. I am watching you become a man your mother would not recognize, and it breaks my heart." He looked up, sensing a crack in my resolve. "Then fix it, Dad," he urged, his eyes hopeful. "Call the hotel. We can still salvage this. We can explain it was a misunderstanding. We can still have the reception tonight. Brianna will forgive you. We can all just go back to how things were." I stared at him, at my handsome, lost son, and the last vestiges of my hope for him withered and died. Even now, after everything, he still didn't get it. He didn't see the wound. He only saw the inconvenience. He thought an apology from Brianna, likely a false one, could simply reset the board. He thought how things were was a place we could ever return to. "No, Andre," I said, my voice hardening again. "We can't. There is no going back." I stood up and walked over to my briefcase, which was sitting on the desk. "The banquet is the least of your problems, son. You are so focused on the decorations for the party, you haven't even realized that the house you're planning to live in is about to be sold." He stared at me, his face a mask of confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Sold? No one is selling our house." "I am," I said simply. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of the title document for the Alpharetta property, the one Denise had emailed to me last night. I unfolded it and slid it onto the bed beside him. "You and Brianna were so excited about the square footage and the gourmet kitchen, you neglected to read the fine print. Look at page 3, section 4, the list of owners." He picked up the paper, his hands trembling slightly. I watched as his eyes scanned the page, his brow furrowed in concentration. And then I saw the exact moment he found it. A deep, shuddering breath escaped his lips. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, gray pallor. His gaze darted from the paper up to my face, his eyes wide with a dawning, catastrophic understanding. 35%, he whispered, the words barely audible. "It says you own 35%. This is a mistake, a typo." "It's no mistake," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It was the condition for the $300,000 gift you so casually dismissed. And as a 35% owner, I have the legal right to sell my share. My lawyer, Mrs. Washington, has already prepared the petition to partition. That means unless you can come up with the money to buy me out at current market value, which, by my estimate, would be about $500,000, a judge will order the sale of the entire property. The house you threw me out of yesterday, Andre, is going on the market." He looked from the paper in his hands to my face, a look of pure, uncomprehending horror on his. The canceled party was a humiliation. This was a catastrophe. This was the end of his entire world. And he was only just beginning to understand the depth of his miscalculation. Andre stumbled out of my hotel room in a daze, the copy of the deed clutched in his hand like a death sentence. He didn't yell or argue further. He was a man who had been hit by a second, much larger wave before he had even recovered from the first. The foundation of his life, the money, the house, the future he took for granted, was crumbling, and he had no idea how to stop it. I knew he would call Brianna immediately. I could picture their conversation, His panicked explanation, her initial disbelief followed by a shriek of rage. They were two deeply selfish people caught in a trap of their own making, and they would not accept their fate gracefully. They would lash out. They would look for a way to rewrite the narrative, to turn themselves back into the victims and me into the villain. I just didn't anticipate how low they would be willing to go. Denise called me later that afternoon. "Leland," she said, her voice tight with a controlled fury, "they did something truly despicable. You need to be prepared." She told me that her office had received a call from a social worker with the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services. An anonymous complaint had been filed. The caller, a concerned family member, had reported that I, Leland Hayes, was suffering from age-related cognitive decline and was being coerced by a predatory lawyer into making irrational financial decisions. They claimed they were deeply worried that I was a danger to myself and my own financial well-being. The sheer, calculated malice of it took my breath away. It wasn't just a lie. It was a weapon designed to strip me of my dignity, my autonomy, and my credibility. They were trying to have me declared mentally incompetent, a senile old man who couldn't be trusted with his own affairs. If they could succeed, they could petition a court to have a guardian appointed, likely Andre, who could then reverse all of my decisions, void the loan, and consolidate their ownership of the house. It was a desperate, disgusting, and utterly evil plan. "What do we do?" I asked Denise, a cold knot of anger tightening in my stomach. "We do nothing," she said, her voice now calm and reassuring. "We let them play their hand. They've made a formal complaint, which means the state is obligated to follow up. A social worker or a police officer will likely pay you a visit for a wellness check. Be polite, be calm, and be prepared. I'm emailing you a full set of your financial documents, my legal retainer, and the report from your last physical and cognitive exam, which, as I recall, you aced with flying colors. When they show up, you show them who you really are, a man in full command of his faculties who is simply refusing to be financially abused by his spoiled children." Her confidence was a balm on the raw wound of their attack. They thought they were being clever, using the system against me. They were about to find out that I, with Denise's guidance, understood that system far better than they did. The trap they had set for me was about to snap shut on them instead. The knock on my hotel room door came the following morning. I was expecting it. I opened it to find two uniformed police officers, a man and a woman, their expressions neutral but professional. "Mr. Leland Hayes?" the male officer asked. "Yes, that's me," I said, offering a calm, polite smile. "Please, come in." They stepped inside, their eyes taking in the scene. A tidy room, a neatly dressed senior citizen, a table with a half-finished crossword puzzle, and a cup of tea. Not exactly the den of a confused, irrational old man. "Sir," the female officer began, her tone gentle, "we're here to perform a wellness check. We received a call expressing some concern for your well-being." "I imagine you did," I said, gesturing for them to sit. "And I imagine the call came from my son, Andre Hayes, or his fiancée, Brianna Montgomery." Their professional masks flickered with surprise. They were accustomed to dealing with confusion or denial, not calm, direct anticipation. "The call was anonymous, sir," the man said. "Of course it was," I replied with a wry smile. "Let me save you some time, officers. My son and I are in the midst of a rather serious financial dispute. When he discovered he could no longer rely on me as his personal bank, he and his fiancée have, it seems, resorted to a rather malicious tactic of trying to have me declared incompetent to manage my own affairs. It's a nasty business, and I'm sorry you've been dragged into it." I walked over to my briefcase and retrieved a neat manila folder. "This might help clarify the situation," I said, handing it to them. "In that folder, you will find a copy of the deed to the home in which my son resides, showing my 35% ownership. You will also find a copy of a $300,000 promissory note he signed." You'll find a full, clean bill of health from my physician, including a cognitive assessment dated 2 months ago. And finally, you'll find the business card of my lawyer, Denise Washington. She has a complete file on this matter and is expecting your call." The two officers exchanged a long, meaningful look. They were no longer looking at a potential victim of old age, but at the clear-headed victim of a nasty, premeditated family dispute. They spent a few minutes looking through the documents, their expressions growing more and more grim. The male officer handed the folder back to me. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice now laced with a deep respect, "it seems you have this situation well in hand. I apologize for the intrusion." "Not at all, officer," I said. "You were just doing your job. I appreciate your professionalism." "For what it's worth, sir," the female officer added, pausing at the door, "filing a false report with Adult Protective Services is a serious offense." "I'll be sure to have Miss Washington mention that to my son," I replied. They left, and I closed the door, the quiet of the room settling around me once more. Brianna and Andre had launched their most vicious personal attack, and I had swatted it away like a fly. I had proven I was not confused, not incompetent, not a victim. I was a formidable opponent, and I was just getting started. Their plan hadn't just failed. It had backfired, creating an official record of their malicious intent. The war was far from over, but I had just won a decisive battle. Their most despicable tactic has failed, leaving them exposed and powerless. The attempt to paint Leland as a victim has only cemented his position of strength. Now, with their lies in tatters, they will be forced to face him on his terms. The next chapter brings them all into one room, the lawyer's office, for a financial reckoning that will bring them to their knees. You cannot miss this confrontation. The failed wellness check was the end of their games. Their attempt to paint me as a feeble-minded old man had not only failed, but had also been documented, creating a formal record of their malice. They were cornered, their tactics exhausted, and they knew it. The day after the officers visited my hotel, a sleek, cream-colored envelope was delivered to their door by a courier. It was from the law offices of Washington and Associates. It was not a suggestion or a request for a meeting. It was a summons. Denise's letter was a masterpiece of legal precision and thinly veiled threat. It formally notified them of my intent to file a partition action to force the sale of the Alpharetta property. It also served as a formal demand for the immediate repayment of the $300,000 loan, citing their bad faith actions as a breach of our familial understanding. The letter concluded by stating that their only opportunity to avoid immediate and ruinous litigation was to attend a settlement conference in her office at 10 a.m. on Friday. Failure to appear, the letter stated, would be taken as a refusal to cooperate, and legal proceedings that would likely result in their bankruptcy would commence immediately. I spent the days leading up to the meeting in quiet contemplation. My anger had cooled, leaving behind a profound and heavy sadness. This was not a corporate takeover. This was the painful, necessary dismantling of my own family. I thought of Andre as a boy, of the immense pride I felt at his college graduation, of the easy laughter we used to share before Brianna's ambition had remolded him. I mourned the loss of that son, the one who had existed before this entitled, weak-willed stranger had taken his place. This meeting was not about revenge. I had no desire to see my son destitute and broken. This was about accountability. It was a final, painful attempt at fatherhood, a lesson in reality that was years overdue. I was not going to this meeting to destroy his life, but to force him, finally, to take ownership of it. I arrived at Denise's office on Friday morning, not with the righteous fury of a victor, but with the somber resolve of a surgeon about to perform a difficult, life-saving, but excruciatingly painful operation. Denise's boardroom was designed to intimidate. A long, dark mahogany table polished to a mirror shine sat under a modern, imposing light fixture. On one side of the table, Denise and I sat, a neat stack of files in front of us. On the other side, Andre and Brianna huddled together, looking small and defeated in the grand, opulent space. They had brought a lawyer with them, a young, nervous-looking man who looked barely out of law school and who was clearly out of his depth. He kept fidgeting with his tie, his eyes darting nervously from Denise's composed face to the grim stack of papers she had placed before her. Andre and Brianna looked exhausted. The defiant rage of the past week had been replaced by a sullen, resentful fear. Brianna's usually perfect makeup was slightly smudged, and Andre's expensive suit looked like it had been slept in. They were no longer the glamorous, powerful couple from the wedding preparations. They were two defendants awaiting their sentence. Denise began the meeting without preamble. She did not offer coffee or pleasantries. "Good morning," she said, her voice filling the silent room. "We are here today to discuss the division of assets and the repayment of a significant debt. My client, Mr. Hayes, would prefer to resolve this matter amicably, but let me be perfectly clear. The terms we are about to discuss are not a negotiation. They are a statement of fact." With that, she turned on the large screen at the end of the boardroom. The first slide appeared, a neatly organized spreadsheet titled Income versus Expenditures, Hayes Montgomery Household. A collective gasp escaped Brianna's lips. For the next 20 minutes, Denise walked them through the brutal, unvarnished truth of their own lives. She showed them their combined income in one column and their spending in another. The numbers were stark. The expenditures on designer clothes, luxury car payments, high-end restaurants, and lavish vacations exceeded their income by nearly double. "As you can see," Denise said, her voice cool and clinical, "you have been living a lifestyle funded not by your own earnings, but by a combination of credit card debt and a steady, significant cash infusion from Mr. Hayes, which you seem to have mistaken for an infinite resource." She clicked to the next slide, which showed the credit card statements I had copied from the safe. She highlighted the charges for secret hotel stays, jewelry I had never seen, flights I knew nothing about. She was systematically exposing every last one of their lies, not with emotion, but with their own cold, hard data. It was a complete financial autopsy, and Andre and Brianna could do nothing but sit there and watch as the facade of their perfect, successful life was clinically dissected and laid bare for all to see. The room was thick with their humiliation. With their financial irresponsibility established beyond any doubt, Denise moved on to the core of the matter. The screen changed to a new slide, titled Assets and Liabilities. It listed the professionally appraised market value of the Alpharetta house, a staggering $1.5 million. Beside it, she calculated my 35% share, $525,000. Below that, she added the $300,000 loan. The grand total of their debt to me was displayed in large, bold, blood-red numbers at the bottom of the screen, $825,000. Brianna made a small, strangled sound, like a dying animal. Andre stared at the screen, his face as white as a sheet. Their young lawyer was frantically scribbling on a legal pad, but he looked like a man trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon. "This is the amount you legally owe my client," Denise stated calmly. "As of today, we see two paths forward for you." She clicked the remote. Option A, you refuse to cooperate. Mr. Hayes will immediately file the partition action. A judge will order the sale of the house. From the proceeds, the mortgage will be paid, my legal fees will be paid, and Mr. Hayes will receive his $825,000. You will be left with whatever remains, which, after capital gains taxes, will be minimal. The loan default and foreclosure will decimate your credit for the next decade. You will be, for all intents and purposes, financially ruined. She let the weight of that reality settle in the room before clicking to the next slide. Option B, you declare bankruptcy. The result is largely the same, only more public and more humiliating. The house will still be sold by the trustee to pay off the primary creditor, who, I remind you, is Mr. Hayes. This was the breaking point. The cold, hard numbers had finally shattered their delusions. Brianna began to sob, not tears of remorse, but of pure, panicked desperation. "You can't do this," she cried, her voice rising hysterically. "You're trying to destroy us." "We'll have nothing. We'll be homeless. Andre finally found his voice, turning to me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading terror. Dad, please, he begged. Don't do this. You're our father. You can't just ruin our lives. There has to be another way. I watched them, my own heart a heavy stone in my chest. This was the moment of their complete and utter surrender. They were no longer the arrogant power couple. They were terrified children, finally understanding the catastrophic consequences of their own actions. I let them sit in that terror for a long, silent minute. Then, and only then, did I speak. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table. My goal is not to destroy you, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of absolute authority. If it were, I would have simply filed the lawsuit and let you read about it in a court summons. My goal, as it has always been, is to see my son become a responsible man. It seems the only way to do that is to force you both to learn the meaning of the word accountability. I looked at Denise, who gave me a slight nod. Therefore, I continued, I am prepared to offer you a third option, a lifeline, but it comes with strict, non-negotiable conditions. This is not a negotiation. It is the only deal you will be offered. They both looked up, their tear-streaked faces a mixture of desperation and fragile hope. Their lawyer had stopped writing and was now just staring, his mouth slightly agape. First, I said, ticking the points off on my fingers, I will agree to reduce the buyout price of my share in the house by 50%. We will call it a family discount. Second, the remaining amount, combined with the original loan, will be converted into a formal 2-year structured loan with a modest but firm interest rate. Third, this agreement is contingent upon the following lifestyle changes. I paused, letting them absorb the faint glimmer of hope before laying out the steel bars of their new reality. 1. Brianna, you will find and maintain a full-time job. You have 60 days to provide proof of employment to Ms. Washington's office. 2. You will sell one of your 2 luxury vehicles within 90 days, and the proceeds will be applied directly to the loan principal. 3. You will both adhere to a strict, detailed monthly budget, which will be drafted and co-signed by Ms. Washington. You will provide monthly bank statements and credit card bills to her office to prove your compliance. I leaned back, letting the full weight of their new, circumscribed life settle upon them. And the most important condition of all, I said, my gaze locking with Andre's. Any violation of these terms, a single missed payment, a failure to provide your monthly reports, Brianna leaving her job without immediately securing another, will render this agreement null and void. The full original debt of $825,000 will become due immediately, and we will proceed with option A. Do you understand? They were trapped. I was offering them a path to survival, but it was a path paved with humility, hard work, and the complete loss of the life they had known. It was a prison of responsibility. Defeated, their heads bowed in surrender, they both nodded. Good, Denise said, sliding a thick document across the table. Then let's sign the contract. The scratching of their pens in the silent boardroom was the sound of their unconditional surrender. They had walked in as arrogant property owners. They were walking out as indentured servants to the consequences of their own making. I had not taken their home. I had taken their freedom. And in doing so, I had given them their only chance at ever truly growing up. The contract is signed, and a new, harsh reality begins for Andre and Brianna. They have avoided total ruin, but at the cost of their freedom. Can they adapt to a life of accountability, or will they crumble under the pressure of their own consequences? The final chapter will leap forward in time to reveal the outcome of this painful lesson, whether it led to genuine change or to a final, irrevocable break. Stay to witness the final verdict. The contract they signed in Denise's office was not merely a financial document. It was the blueprint for a new, harsher reality. The sprawling, opulent life they had known was over, replaced by a rigid, unforgiving architecture of consequence. I, in the meantime, had begun a new construction of my own. I sold the last of my properties in Atlanta and, taking Denise's long-standing advice, moved into a beautiful independent living community in a quieter part of the state, a place where the scent of pine and freshly cut grass replaced the city's exhaust fumes. My new apartment was smaller than the guest room in their Alpharetta mansion, but it was entirely my own, filled with my books, Thelma's pictures, and a profound sense of peace. I joined a Nordic walking club that met 3 times a week, my fellow members a motley crew of retired professors, witty widows, and a former Air Force colonel who told outrageously unbelievable stories. I discovered a passion for woodworking in the community workshop, the scent of sawdust and the patient shaping of wood a balm to my soul. I was building a life, my own life, free from the exhausting burden of their expectations. I was no longer Leland Hayes, the family bank. I was just Leland, the guy who was surprisingly good at both bridge and building birdhouses. Meanwhile, a different story was unfolding in Alpharetta. Denise, as per our agreement, would forward me a summarized version of their monthly financial reports. It was a grim, fascinating narrative of a lifestyle in freefall. The first report documented the sale of Brianna's prized white convertible, the proceeds a significant but still daunting drop in the ocean of their debt. The subsequent reports were a litany of austerity, credit card statements showing grocery bills from budget supermarkets instead of high-end organic markets, gas receipts instead of Uber Black charges, the complete and utter absence of designer. Clothing purchases? I read of Brianna's humbling job search, a series of rejections before she finally landed a position as an administrative assistant at a large dental practice. It wasn't the glamorous career she had envisioned, but it was a job, a paycheck, and a mandatory requirement of her new constrained existence. I felt no pleasure in their struggle, only a distant clinical hope that the harsh medicine was working, that this forced immersion in the real world would finally teach them the lessons they had so arrogantly ignored. About 6 months after the signing of the contract, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Brianna's name. It was the first time she had called me directly since the disastrous wedding weekend. I hesitated for a moment, then answered, my voice a neutral, cautious hello. Leland? Her voice was different. The sharp, entitled edge was gone, replaced by a quiet weariness. I just wanted to tell you something. I got a promotion. Oh? I said, genuinely surprised. Congratulations. It's not much, she said quickly, as if embarrassed. I'm the office manager now. It comes with a small raise. I wanted you to know. She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. When my boss told me, I actually cried. Not because I was happy, but because I was so relieved. That little bit of extra money meant we wouldn't be so close to the edge this month. And I realized I have never in my life felt that way about money. I never understood what it meant to earn it, to worry about it, to feel the physical relief of a little bit of security. She was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, I heard the sound of a dam breaking. All those years, she continued, her voice thick with an emotion I had never heard from her before, shame. All those years, I just thought money appeared. I saw you as this endless well. It never once occurred to me that the well had a bottom, that it was filled with your life's work, with your love for your wife. You weren't just supporting us, Leland. You were shielding us from reality, and we hated you for trying to show it to us. I am so sorry for everything, for what I said to you in the kitchen, for how I treated you. I was a spoiled, awful person. I'm trying not to be that person anymore. The apology was raw, unvarnished, and utterly sincere. It was born not of a desire to appease me, but of a genuine, painful self-awareness. It was the first crack of dawn after a long, dark night. Thank you for telling me, Brianna, I said, my own voice softer than I intended. That means a great deal. I didn't offer forgiveness. Not yet. It was not something that could be given so easily. But for the first time, I believed it might one day be possible. The lesson was beginning to take hold. That phone call was the beginning of a slow, tentative thaw. A month later, Andre called and awkwardly invited me to have lunch with him. Not at their house, but at a modest, family-owned diner halfway between my new home and theirs. Neutral territory. I agreed. The first lunch was stiff and uncomfortable. We spoke of neutral topics: the weather, my woodworking projects, Brianna's challenges with managing the dental office schedule. But there was a subtle shift. They asked me questions and actually listened to the answers. They were no longer waiting for their turn to talk about themselves. They were learning to have a conversation. Over the next year and a half, these lunches became a semi-regular occurrence. Each time, the tension lessened. They talked about the stress of their budget, the small victories of paying off a credit card, the novel experience of saving up for a necessary home repair instead of just buying a new appliance. Andre, no longer propped up by my money or Brianna's social ambitions, began to sound more like himself. He spoke with pride about a project at work, a pride born of his own accomplishment, not of the bonus it would bring. Brianna spoke of the people she worked with, of the satisfaction she found in solving a difficult patient's insurance issue. They were becoming partners, a real team, forged not in luxury, but in the shared struggle of their financial boot camp. About a year in, they invited me to their house for dinner. The home I walked into was different. The ostentatious, impersonal decor had been softened. The ridiculously expensive abstract art was gone, replaced by photographs of their own, of a hiking trip they'd taken, of a stray dog they'd started feeding. The air no longer smelled of expensive artificial fragrances, but of roasted chicken and garlic. Brianna, wearing an apron over her simple work clothes, was the one cooking. The meal was simple, and it was one of the best I had ever had in that house. They were no longer performing a life for an imaginary audience. They were simply living one. The respect they showed me that evening was not the fawning deference of a child to a bank, but the quiet, mutual respect of one adult for another. On a Tuesday 2 years to the day after they had signed the contract, I received a notification from my bank. The final payment for the loan had been made. The debt was settled. They were free. That evening, a text message appeared on my phone. It was from Brianna. The last payment went through today. We're officially out of debt to you. It feels surreal. Thank you, Leland. Not for the money, but for making us grow up. We would love to have you for dinner this Sunday, not as our creditor, or our co-owner, or our lifeline, just as our father, as family. If you can still accept that, I stared at the message for a long time, a warmth spreading through my chest. I thought of the man I had been, sitting in my car outside their house, a gilded exile filled with a cold and righteous anger. I had set out to teach them a lesson, to enforce a contract. I had never expected that, in forcing them to build their own lives, we might all find a way to rebuild our family. I arrived at their home that Sunday, not as a king visiting his chastened subjects, but as a guest. The atmosphere was light, filled with an easy, genuine affection that had been absent for years. Andre met me at the door with a real hug, the kind I remembered from his childhood. We ate, we talked, we laughed. And as I sat on their sofa, watching the two of them work together to clear the table, a real partnership forged in the fires of adversity, I realized the profound truth of the journey we had been on. I had thought my greatest gift to them was the $300,000. I was wrong. My greatest gift was taking it away. I had removed the cushion they had always used to break their falls, and in doing so, I had forced them to learn how to stand. They had hit the ground, hard, but they had gotten up together, and now they were standing taller than I had ever seen them. I was no longer a resource. I was no longer a safety net. I was simply a father, a man visiting his son and daughter-in-law, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt truly free and profoundly, unexpectedly, whole. Our family had not been restored to what it was. It had been reborn into something stronger, something more honest, something built not on the shaky foundation of money, but on the solid bedrock of hard-earned respect.